friends. So we've all figured out by now that there are all these different personality types that people have, and that there are some common ones that we see in cases of people who get conditions like ME/CFS and long COVID. Not that we caused this condition, it's just a perfect storm of things going on, and this is just one of those ingredients. But rarely do we talk about what to do with that information. Like, now what? So in this video, we're going to go through exactly what the different personality types are, and then what this means for you in terms of how to best approach your recovery. What types of programs might be a good fit for you because of the way you're kind of wired or your general habits and approach to life, and how do you best work with this personality type of yours and use it and work with it to speed up your recovery and just generally be more successful with things. So let's welcome Lindsay Vine. She is a trusted voice in our community and just a mountain of insight and information, and just a lovely, lovely human. I can't get enough of her. So let's dive right in and welcome Lindsay. Hey, Lindsay. Thank you so much. It's so great to have you back.
So nice to be here, Raelan.
We got our co-host, Winnie and Blue.
Yeah.
All right. So such a fascinating topic, one that comes up in, I think, virtually every recovery interview that I do. So tell us more about this.
Yeah, we're talking today about personality types and how that coincides with the people who get CFS and how it can help you in recovery learning about these things. I first learned about this topic from Gabor Mate, Dr. Gabor Mate's book, When the Body Says No. Have you read that book?
No, but people reference it all the time, so I definitely should.
Yeah, no, it's just, I can summarize it with what we're going to talk about today, truly, is that from his work as a doctor, with all kinds of chronic illnesses, he started to notice that there were similar personality types in the types of people that would get these illnesses. So he started to study that and look into that more and more. So just to get it out there, the three personality types that we're going to talk about today and go into a little bit. One is people who are achievers or perfectionists often, people who feel like they should be doing more. There's more that they should be doing, that they have to do it right, and they're really self-critical of themselves when they don't. The second is repressed emotions, which is a really interesting one because it's also the topic of Dr. John Sarno's work, who found that a lot of people who had chronic back pain, and then he's, with his mind-body prescription book, talked about other illnesses. People with these illnesses, once they got out all these repressed emotions, often anger, that they hadn't been able to express in their life, they would start to heal. And he has incredible scientific studies about how impactful on healing it was to get out these emotions. And then the third characteristic that Dr. Gabor Mate talks about is people pleasers. And that's something that I highly identified with in my life. And we can talk deeper about what's really going on there and how we can start to change how we approach the world. So yeah, how do you resonate with those three?
Oh, massively. And I just, as you're talking about it, all these different people I've interviewed pop up in my head. I'm like, oh yeah, this person, I remember saying that, and that person. And I'm guilty that for a long time, I was putting out this message that it's a lot of type A overachievers who seem to get unwell with these sorts of conditions. And it definitely is. But over time, I started to realize it's so much more than that. And I'd have people reaching out saying, that's not me. That doesn't resonate. That's not my personality. Yet here I am in the exact same position. And these things that you're talking about started coming up more and more. And the people pleasing one, it's almost like it's its own version of, type A overachiever. It's just in a different direction. You're just constantly putting everyone else's needs before your own and aiming for this level of perfectionism and pleasing everybody else and never letting anybody else down and never having any boundaries and never saying no, or rarely, I should say, in these things, which can be exhausting. And on top of that, not just being stressful and exhausting, quite often means that your own self-care goes out the window.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's how I identified with it, because I'm really not what you'd call a perfectionist. In fact, people would be like, Lindsay's so chill, she's so chill. And I remember when I was doing a job I hated, they loved me because I was easygoing, you know? And like now I look at that as a bad thing. Back then I was so proud of being so easygoing. But it is almost like you say, a reverse of perfectionism in a way, that you're so worried about making sure everyone else is happy that you'll put your needs second. So yeah, that's a really good observation and it's absolutely true. So yeah, I think we can like even like dig down within these personality types into what helps these people heal. So that's what I'd like to talk about too.
This is what we need to talk about. I start a song like, this is the issue. Like, okay, now what?
Yeah, exactly. That's what people want to know is like, how does that help me? So let's start with the perfectionism achiever thing. And I'm going to bring a little bit of the parts work talk into it. If you don't know what parts work, I definitely recommend you look into Dr. Dick Schwartz or Richard Schwartz. And he's the one who created internal family systems theory. Dr. Richard Schwartz's book, No Bad Parts, I highly recommend. Because it's the idea that we have these parts inside of us and none of them are bad. They're all trying to protect us. So your perfectionism is a way, it's a protective strategy. So we have to learn to give it love and give it other options instead of perfectionism, instead of to protect you, in other words, right? So the people who really do identify with that perfectionism, I would say what I see the most is that they actually need something less structured to heal. Like there's often, they're struggling with doing everything right. So it's about like relieving that pressure because in a parts work point of view, like that perfectionist part of you, inside of you, it was trying to keep you safe, but it also associated that with like danger, right? Something was dangerous. So learning to let go a little bit in any way you can and take that pressure off is really a big part of healing for perfectionists, I would say. Is that what you would you recognize yourself as a perfectionist, Raelan?
Yeah, and it makes so much sense. And kind of to add fuel to the fire, when I first got sick, I went to my doctor and he said something along the lines of, the good news is, because he recognized that I was that person, like he was giving me really insane things to follow and I followed them to the letter. It was like 100 pills a day that had to be taken at like 9 different times. It's like I just was on top of whatever he said, I did it. And just it had to be perfect. And he told me that the good news is it kind of like, it's probably a lot of this personality trait that contributed to becoming unwell, but these same personality traits will also get you well. So I even embraced it even more. I'm like, okay, keep being rigid, keep being hard on myself, like keep allowing no room for error. And it just, well-intentioned, and he was a great guy and I appreciate him, but I had to let go of all of it, as much of that. I mean, it's a work in progress. It takes time, but it wasn't healthy for me. And I can see how having that person drive your recovery bus can be problematic.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's important to say a few things there that you kind of brought up. One is like, first of all, to say you're not sick just because of that. I don't want it to make it sound like because you're a perfectionist, you're sick. Like there's a lot of factors going on that made you sick, that you ended up reaching a level that your bucket overfloweth, as they say, like it was too much. But it is something that we can start to get under control and then help our nervous system have more space for healing, right? And the second thing I was going to say is to really recognize the roots of these are so deep. Like they come from childhood, even if they're small t traumas, as many people say, which is incremental things that where your emotions weren't fully validated or you weren't able to be expressed, they can be so small. But it comes from years and years as a child of living a certain way and then growing up to learn that that was the safest way to live, right? So really be easy on yourself for these things, because it's not like they came from just one little thing and you can switch it in your brain, right? So yeah, that's what I would say about the perfectionist quality. Now, me, I'm actually not a perfectionist in that way. People would say it's the same thing in a way, but being an achiever is more about, I should be doing this, I should be doing this, but then they don't necessarily do it all because they're like, someone else will do it better, or maybe I'm not good enough. Or, there's a lot of stuff that goes in to being a person who's like an achiever, but not a perfectionist. And sometimes these personality types like my own actually do need more structure, because in a parts work point of view, it's almost like teaching your parts that you will take care of them, because you've been so like wishy-washy for all these years about, will I, won't I, and then you don't do it. Making plans like me often and then not following through, things like that. But actually, like, it's really interesting to think of like some of these diets that help people heal. I truly don't believe it's the diet itself necessarily that helps people, but it's like you're telling yourself you're going to take care of yourself. It's like the follow through of doing it. It's almost like the placebo effect, really, of like that confidence within yourself that, oh, she is going to take care of me. When I learned to follow routines, I was never a routine person. It was like giving myself this inner confidence that I could do these things, because I had always been like, I'm not a person who can follow routines, and whenever you say I'm not a person who can ... that's what you should question, because there are no set personality types, really. You can change. It's really, really an interesting aspect that, what we need can be very different depending on the person.
Yeah, the diet one is interesting. Initially, I really credited diet as being one of the big pieces of my pie or puzzle or whatever that helped me to recover. But looking back, and I think it helped me a lot health-wise, but how much was it fixing or curing my chronic fatigue syndrome? I don't know. But it just made me feel good. And I did start seeing benefits in my body from the diet changes, as you do when you start eating better. And then I think there's just a whole autonomic nervous system thing that kicks in. You're like, oh, I feel good about this. This makes me happy. My gut health is getting better. Not that these aren't good things that contribute to overall health, but just not as black and white as I used to think of it. And, food is so important for so many conditions. And if you're looking at things like diabetes or, all sorts of things, it can have a dramatic impact on your recovery journey. But with CFS, it seems to be, at least for some people, from the people I've talked to, much less of a factor than I would have initially thought, at least directly.
Yeah.
Healthy food isn't good. Please still be healthy. It's still important, but maybe just isn't a part of the equation in the same way that we might have thought.
Yeah. Or if it is, it's like maybe more about the effect it has on calming your nervous system to do it than the actual foods themselves, which is why brain retraining can be really effective, right? Yeah. So whatever can help you get there is great, but it is interesting to like notice the personality types and how they differ. But so the next area is the emotional repression. So I'm sure you've probably heard this a lot. People who've been helped by things like journal speak or therapies that get their emotions out. Have you heard that a lot in interviews?
Oh my goodness, yes. Almost every single interview.
Yeah, that's a really hard one because the science behind it is a little bit slow. There is some science behind it. Dr. Gabor Mate talks about chromosomal changes in people who've had more trauma in their early life versus people who haven't. There's a study on that. And then there's some new studies about the cell health of, again, I like look at my arm for some reason. There's cells
right here.
The cell health of people who have more stress and trauma in their life is less ideal than people who have more calm lives. So the science is starting to catch up that there is actually a basis for why getting these things out and learning how to process your emotions can actually free up room for healing. So that's a really interesting one if you haven't explored it. Honestly, I have a client in November we started. She was bedbound, and just from Journal Speak, which is one I often recommend to people, Nicole Sachs was a student of Dr. Sarno's, and Journal Speak is a way that you write out all your anger every day, 20 minutes, stream of consciousness. Mm-hmm. And just from that, she's up to like 8,000 steps now. And it was a person I could see, she felt like something was very repressed. So it's really interesting how effective it can be for certain people. Not everyone, but certain people.
Yeah, virtually everyone. So many of the people I've talked to have incorporated some element of this, whether it's through journaling or meditation or counseling and therapy or just some kind of self-reflection work. Most of us don't realize how much we are carrying, and we think because we didn't have what is depicted as a classically, traumatic childhood or past, or didn't come from a war-torn country, that we don't have any right to spend any time devoted to these things, and that there's no need for it. And in my recovery, and I did talk about this in my book, I mention it just because I mentioned diet as well, which I no longer think is as important as I used to. But this one I know really did deliver, because I had to sit down and just start listing out what I was carrying. And I realized there were things from like when I was a teenager that I was still carrying around. And I notice it even now that I've got more serious in meditation, when I get really silent, like what are those things that pop up that I just have been shoving down for decades? And it all has an impact. And yeah, very important stuff.
Yeah. And that's really good that you have this knowledge and that comes up with meditation, because before I got sick, I meditated. I was all into Buddhism and everything before that. But I know now it's called emotional bypassing. It's like you have to first get out the emotion before you can start to like find peace and forgiveness for a lot of people as well. Like it's like skipping a step sometimes. I think that we miss that step of having the space to actually be allowed to express ourselves. And a lot of people will respond like, I have a physical illness. What the heck are you talking about? Like, this is not a mental illness. This is not trauma. It's really interesting, the effect it has. I really can't rave enough about the impact. And if you're looking for a form of therapy that is more effective in this, I'd look for an IFS, internal family systems therapist, or somatic experiencing. It's a way of getting your emotions out using your body. Those are two of the most effective from what I've seen.
Something that new that can really supplement this, not replace it. Nothing's going to replace a trained therapist or a human being, but I started doing AI journaling recently, and I did a video about it, and the response has been absolutely incredible. It sounds complicated, but it's really not. It's just a journal that talks to you. Like you can just talk to it like I'm talking to you right now. You don't even need to type, which is great. So if you have trouble with screens, you just hit record, and then it just helps you. And it's a very supportive process. It can offer suggestions if you like. It can reframe things for you. It can show you patterns that you might not be seeing. And the response from viewers has been absolutely incredible, and that like people are like, I just, I could not believe what I was carrying. Like I started this and I started crying. And I find that there's something about talking to a journal, as opposed to writing things down, is that I'm even more honest. And maybe just because I can say more, but it's harder sometimes to put things down on paper or to type out the words. But when you can just speak, I find it's a freer way to let go of things. So I can link it below. There's a free version. This isn't an affiliate anything. It's just something new on the horizon to supplement all of these other therapies and programs. I think, at least for some people, can be really powerful. It's really amazing.
Yeah, it is really amazing. One thing I would say too is just be a little careful with where you are in your healing journey. Some people aren't ready really for this. It's a bit overwhelming and it's a bit much for their nervous system. I think you have to be at a certain stage before, and you kind of know. That's what I like about recommending things like journaling, is that your subconscious won't let you go deeper than it's ready if you're doing it on your own. But if you notice like it's causing too many symptoms and it's you're not there yet, listen to that. It's absolutely something I'd say.
Yeah, when I made my list when I was doing my own recovery of the things I needed to tackle, I tackled them very slowly and only on days or weeks where I felt like it, like I just knew each one was like a sort of cleanse and was probably going to take kind of a round out of me. I was going to feel a little bit worse before I felt better. And it had to be like, okay, am I in a space to explore this one this week? Nope. Okay, then we don't touch it and we wait.
Yeah,
so that is a really important point. I'm so glad you brought it up, because it is, it can be a big thing to work through.
But it's interesting how it happens, because about midway through my illness, a friend who's a counselor said, Lindsay, honestly, I believe this is a trauma illness. And I was like, what are you talking about? I had a fine childhood. I couldn't even like fathom that being a factor. And then in the end, it ended up being a huge part of my recovery, going through that stuff. So Yeah, it's really, really interesting how you have to be ready for it to get into it. No, and just the third one, which we touched on already, is the people pleasing. I just think it's important that people start to recognize like how these patterns came up in their childhood. Like there was a lot of guilt in my childhood, I would say, like guilt coming from my parents of like, you know, you should be doing this, should be doing that. And it becomes so deeply ingrained in us. And really, when we're people pleasing, it's about us. It's not about the other people. And it's about what we feel and how we feel in the world. So becoming more aware of your motivation for saying yes to everything or trying to make everyone in the room comfortable, start really getting down to where that comes from is like the first step to healing it. Absolutely. And like you said, I still struggle. I mean, it's a journey.
Yeah, it's like everything. I think it's as long as you're 2 steps forward, 1 step back, you're still going the right direction. And just knowing that those backward steps are always there. Sometimes I get on this good path. I'm like, I have seen the light. I will never go back to how I used to be, whether it's like food or meditation or personality, you know, expression or all of these things. And it's just, you know, you fall back sometimes. But
yeah, absolutely. And it's like, yeah, if you set a boundary and then that helps with your confidence and then that helps with setting more boundaries. So it can be helpful. And then, yeah, sometimes it's a little bit of a train. Definitely.
That's normal. We all do it. We all do it. We all get off track. We all forget what we've learned. We all have to relearn it. We have to pick ourselves back up and keep going and be like, we're all kind of a beautiful mess on somewhere on the spectrum. I think it's just about, for me, as I go through life, it's about not letting myself stay in that off-track place and having kind of the tools built into my life to have the insight that it's happening and just over time building more and more habits, you know, because habits is, you know, brain retraining. It's just putting things on autopilot and then it's easier to get back into it. Like once those neural pathways are kind of there, you just pick yourself up. Oh, right. This is what I'm wanting to be doing. Let's move forward with this.
Yeah. And also like, self-compassion. Like, be nice to yourself about it. Yeah, it's so huge.
That's probably the biggest one.
I've learned it so much over this journey. Absolutely.
Lindsay, amazing having you here as always. Thank you so much. This was incredible.
Yeah, I hope it was helpful for people.
Yeah. For people watching, everything you need to know about Lindsay is in the video description. I encourage you to just take a moment and expand and see what's there. She's got an incredible recovery programs guide. If you're looking for coaching or recovery programs, it's all there. And she is also a coach herself. So you can have this beautiful person in your life, if you like, to help support you on your journey. And she's got an incredible podcast and all sorts of stuff. So all of that will be there for you to explore.
Thank you so much for everything you do, Raelan. You really are such an incredible inspiration for everyone.
Oh, I love doing it. It's one of my favorite parts of my life. So happy to do it. All right. Thank you again, Lindsay. Thank you to those of you watching. Looking forward to your comments and your thoughts. What do you think about all of this? Let's keep the conversation going because you guys are the true wealth of knowledge. And I'd love to hear your experience and your strategies and your insights on all of this. Great. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.